Hey everybody, it's John here, National Sports Entertainment, and I just wanted to recap tonight's game. I must say, of all the games that we've picked, I'd say this one has, at least on prime time, I saw the most shenanigans, and of course we'll take it. Like I said, this is all, at least most of it is choreographed, so anytime it goes our way, we're going to take it, but of course it doesn't always go our way. Not the result, but every single play. But I noticed a few things from this game, and some are just jump off at the page. Let me just tackle the first one right away, and that is what most people were thinking about when Russell Wilson decided to throw that interception. Again, to me, this is just more proof. If you really don't think these people are throwing games, or if you think that these quarterbacks that have been Pro Bowlers for, if you combine the two, it has to be 10, 11 time, probably like 15, 16 time Pro Bowlers, because I think Wilson made 10. They don't make these throws. They don't make these decisions. Matt Ryan shaved about 6 to 9 points off of this game by taking sacks. And then the most blatant one was where he just decided to pan through the field and then come back to the middle to throw an interception into triple coverage. And of course, Michaels and Herbstreit just tried to play it off as a chess match, and they were just tricked. And the lurking safety made the cut when he was there the whole time. Then that's a lot of the narratives you'll see there. They'll clean up the mess. And then we saw it with Russell, obviously. The same thing. Russell made a bunch of horrible throws. Then when he had his completion, I would like to say assisted by the official, who quite literally tackled our safety, who was making a play on the ball. They did the same thing, and they said, it's a chess match, and he beat him over the top. And now the Colts safety had a perfect play on that ball. It had the official, who should not even be anywhere near that spot. Their entire job is to stay on their line so they don't get stuck in the play. And yeah, he just gets stuck in the middle of what seemed to be a 2 or 3 vert, and just happened to trip up the safety who had the play on the ball. And you'll see it go both ways. So there's no one guy. That's what I'm saying. There's no one guy shaving these points. They both do it, and it's for a reason. As we discussed before, more of this money comes in live than comes in before the game. At least on the over-under, you have a lot of people, and people betting live spreads. So that was pretty. It seemed like they were just slowing down the game a lot, doing a lot of back and forth, almost to adjust to what Vegas was going to have the most money coming in at. Now, again, the reason we picked the Colts, it was pretty, to me, it was just the fact that they have Jonathan Taylor get hurt, and Vegas is trying to sell us that they don't move at all, maybe a half a point. And Russell's banged up, but he's playing. He practiced. So it just didn't make sense to me, and a lot of people saw that as a red flag. One thing I noticed, and this was interesting, so this is in the third quarter I noticed this. I decided to peep the stat because they didn't bring it up, and I just thought, Matt Ryan, he's got to be pretty close here. So if we look down and we look at the all-time quarterback comebacks, you will see that Matt Ryan is 1 behind Drew Brees, and now he tied him. This was before. It should reflect now. I don't know how quickly it reflects. No, not yet. But he just tied him tonight. And it's interesting to me because I went through the list of teams that he did beat, and you'll see he's beaten about 20. I didn't count everyone, but I want to say he's beaten between 24 and 26 separate teams in these comebacks. And you'll see he has not beat Denver one time. Now, I remember when they pushed this with Brady, and they were saying how he beat every single team, but he's never come back against X. Let's say Kansas City, most likely. And then he did come back against them. So when I saw this, I was pretty happy because I liked the narrative of Matt Ryan tying Brees. And they didn't really say much about it, probably because maybe they knew it would have been obvious. But with Denver being one of the few teams not on his list, that makes sense to me. So when I saw that, I was intrigued. And speaking of intrigue, look who's number 1, and look who's just number 1 right behind him. I wonder when they're going to have him tie and then break that. And the great thing about this is, just like Aaron Judge, they telegraph these records being broken and tied horribly. So especially Brady coming from Manning's, that's going to be, I think, telegraphed so obviously when he comes back and wins that game to tie him and then to beat him. But yeah, we won either way. I know. So, and the other thing that was obvious that I want to talk about is in my last video I pointed out players and analysts and these talking heads calling out their own bullshit, and that's exactly what we saw here. So just conveniently after, instead of just running out the clock, and I would have drew if that happened, but I was happy drawing because I figured, okay, they'll get the first down, no need for a field goal, I'll draw this. And sure enough, Russell Wilson decides to repeat a mistake of 8 years past by throwing an interception right into the hands of the waiting Stephon Gilmore. And what I found interesting about that is, of course, who's backstage right afterwards to talk about how ridiculous of a play it was. Richard Sherman, who of course was on that Seahawks team when Wilson threw the interception on the against the Patriots. So it's just an interesting full circle thing. But more interesting is the fact that, again, here we have them telling us, it's all in plain sight. They don't hide it. He's coming out saying, essentially, this head coach ought to be fired or he's throwing this game. Because anybody that was watching this game that had the +3 or the -3 or just watching in general, but especially with the +3, because my first mindset was, I don't want the Colts to stop them here because then they're going to kick a field goal and then Ryan's got to travel about 80 yards in a couple minutes when they haven't scored all game. But then they got the first down, and I was happy with that. But like I said, it wasn't good enough for us and the Broncos, who decided instead of wasting more clock and going up 6, we're just going to throw a horrible throw. So, again, we will take it every day of the week. But this is what I mean when people say, oh, it can't be, or these guys are really fighting. I do think that a lot of these guys are fighting, but there's no way quarterbacks like Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson make plays like this. There's no way. I don't care if they're adjusting to new systems. Russell Wilson was in a very complex system, and now he's adjusting to a pretty simple one where it's just basically quick reads and get the ball out and let his receivers make something happen. And his running back, he didn't, there's not much to adjust to. It's harder to adjust to Seattle where it's quick, pick up option reads, etc. Same with Matt Ryan. Not much of a system change. It's a very similar offense that they had in Atlanta, but they want to push that narrative that these guys aren't going to get it together. And like I said, I'm happy we got this one right off the bat because of all the ones that we have picked, in my opinion, that we have picked so far, I do believe that as far as a primetime game, this one was definitely the hardest one to call. That was why I said I did not want this as sequence number 2 to our outstanding Stanford one. I have a game that I do have in mind for that. But this is sequence number 22, and we officially won it. I took the +3, but just as a condensed time, Indy win. And again, this was for 25. So what this means is we don't obviously double up here. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but this is what I'm doing. And then we would move on to sequence 23, and sequence 21 that hasn't finished yet is the Colorado State game. So we're doing good. Like I said, we're moving up by the end of the Colorado State game, and after the London game. And I think they will. I think the London game for sure goes our way. So if Colorado State doesn't lose, that's the game I'm doing sequence 2 on. But I think both of them, I think we hit between those two, and that'll put us right around number 6. And that's mostly it. I think a lot of you guys might have noticed the same thing. I thought the Matt Ryan comeback stat was very interesting. Obviously, it went into the fact that there's the first time, I think, ever that there was 2 quarterbacks with as many Pro Bowls as these two without a touchdown. And a couple more of the in plain sight stuff that I found interesting. And again, a lot of this stuff is more obvious than others. Like I said, like the referee tripping people. To me, that was just blatantly obvious. And as was these interceptions where they're throwing it into double, triple coverage. And there's no excuse for them. It's not like the person was shading back. They're just throwing horrible interceptions. But the other metric we used is the Broncos had beat the Niners on prime time last week. I have noticed that in a lot of these cases, the very next week, that not every time, but if they're playing back-to-back weeks, they will lose on prime time, then they'll win on prime time. And to me, again, that's all narrative. That's all wrestling. Wrestling, the same guy is usually going to, if it's Roman Reigns, someone that's really over, when Brock was over, they're never going to lose, but they'll lose matches that don't matter, or they'll get disqualified, or just in general, when it's not a prime time pay-per-view, and anything can happen. The shittiest guy can beat the best guy, but when it gets to pay-per-view time, typically you're going to have the team that's better that's going to win, and it's not usually going to happen when you have two pretty even back-to-backs, where we had Denver playing San Francisco. They just edged that one out. They were still stressing the narrative. Russ is getting used to things, and now we have the Colts. And what this is going to do is it's going to set up going forward. The Colts, they beat the Chiefs, then they beat the Broncos. They beat the Broncos on the road. So it's definitely going to establish them as a possible threat. They're going to hone in on the defense and how they play a very sound game. I don't think they do anything. I just don't. They might finish something like 8-9 or something to that effect. But I think they're just going to push that narrative as they push the Russ getting off to a slow start. And again, I think Russ does come back at some point and get a few wins together, just because I don't think they don't want Russ in the playoffs as a draw. Maybe year one I could see him not getting in, but they definitely want Russ in there as a draw. These are the games coming up. We will go into these, but there are some college games on Saturday that I was going to do some research into. I like Tennessee here. Hendon Hooker. I think they're going to push this guy, and he's basically NFL ready. He's everything the NFL would want. I noticed that they push those kind of quarterbacks. And I hadn't looked through all the games, but that one stuck out to me. Kansas stuck out because I see two good teams that people slept on. And I think if they're trying to push somebody, it makes sense that they're going to push Daniels, who's been tearing up the league. He's only a junior, so if they want to establish him as a Heisman, especially by next year, I'm leaning for the spreads on both of these, but we'll pick it later. Kansas as well as Tennessee. I think both of them can pull that off. And we'll do official picks. But mostly, you guys are awesome because you cover everything, like a lot of this stuff in the comments too. So we knew why we were picking the Colts here. It wasn't a layup, like I said a million times. It was a game that definitely could have gone both ways. It's just when Vegas has a spread like that, a guy gets injured, they don't really change it. Usually indicates they're trying to set a trap and get some people to bet on the wrong team, and I think that's what they did here. So this one, here we go. Oh, it's because I said. Maybe it didn't grade out yet, I don't know. No, it graded. No, I picked it yesterday. Let's just skim down until we find it. You always want to be sure because sometimes you'll notice. Now, I know it went through because our bankroll went up. There we go. Colts +3. That one's out. We got that one. You always like to make sure. Sometimes you'll be surprised. You'll check and see that it was a misgrade. So we're good there. Always like to check on that. And that's basically it. I don't want to keep you guys too long. Any specific things you noticed, if you want to let me know, because a lot of times I'll miss these talking heads. One thing I noticed, and I don't know if you guys did, this happened 3 times. So I think there were 4 interceptions on 3 of them, and they only went to this guy a few times. They flashed over to the incompetent coach for the Broncos, and he's wearing this Intercept Cancer shirt, this hoodie, and sure enough, they flash back, and the next pass Ryan throws it, pick. Then the next time they flash to him, Russ had the ball, and they're showing the Intercept Cancer, pick. They flashed to him a couple other times, but they zoomed in on his face. Then sure enough, they flashed back to him again, showing his whole body, Intercept Cancer, and that's when Russ threw the pick to Gilmore. So to me, that's all very, I find that coincidental. If they were showing him all game with that Intercept Cancer shirt, I could understand. But they made a point of showing it right before interceptions were thrown. And that could be, again, you can say it's a coincidence, but I just don't think any of this stuff is a coincidence. So yeah, we did good tonight. It's a good one to win immediately, just because it is one of those, especially with live betting, determining a lot of actions. It could have gone both ways. That's why I picked the +3. So anyone that picked the money line, good job. You got a nice payout. And anyone that picked +3, anything in general, good job. Matt Ryan went over. Most of what should have happened, I feel like, did. And the under's odd. Like I said in my last video, I could see the under not hitting and the Colts starting off 0-5 on it. That's why I did lean picking the game total picking the spread versus the over-under. Now, the Baltimore-Cincinnati game is a different story. I do like the over there instead of the spread. And I went into my last video on why I think they are presented as different teams than teams we just saw these last two nights with the Colts and then the game with the Rams-Niners. I think we're going to see a flashy game. You guys know the Bucs and the Packers hasn't changed. I do like a few other teams. I'm really liking the Jets game, so I'll be adding that. I've been looking over the Bills game with a 14-point spread. It could be a trap either way. I was leaning Bills -14. But again, just like we always do with the Niners, like we did with the Colts, we'll go into exactly why. And when I lock those picks in, I will do it live. The only outstanding one we have, obviously, is Colorado State here. We just need the over to hit on that one. And once that happens, or if it doesn't, we will double up with Green Bay. But I think there's a really good chance the over hits here. So everybody, great job. As I always say, happy earnings. I'm glad to see everybody's just, bouncing ideas off of each other. And that's the only way I think that we're going to really get ahead of these narratives. I found some interesting things with the Raiders and some teams in general. So I definitely want to go into those deep dives. It's just I definitely want to be able to also get my picks out so we can at least make money. But yeah, I'll definitely want to do a deep dive video on just what I think they're setting up for these teams for the playoffs. Take care, everybody, and happy earnings.